Tim Dickinson. I'm a contributing editor with Rolling Stone. I cover national affairs and politics. It's been my belief that the media have been vetting the wrong candidate, and part of our logic for doing this piece was to try and subject John McCain to the same sort of scrutiny that has recently befallen Sarah Palin. I just wrote the cover story, Make Believe Maverick, and I'm here to tell you the top 5 myths about John McCain. Myth number 5, that John McCain is, was, or has ever been an outsider. John McCain likes to present himself as an outsider. It couldn't be further from the truth. He grew up in the district. He attended an elite prep school across the river called Episcopal, where today tuition costs $42,000 a year. The house that he grew up in during his teenage years was a prime pit stop on the Washington cocktail circuit that today John McCain likes to denounce. His dad was the Navy's Senate liaison. John McCain himself held that spot as the Senate's top lobbyist after he returned from Vietnam. He used that position to buddy up to senators like Gary Hart and even Joe Biden. In a far cry from the way he bills himself today, in his first congressional campaign, John McCain billed himself as an insider, someone who knew the ways of Washington and could get things done. John Sidney McCain III's biography is familiar because it's very similar to that of George W. Bush. Both are the third generation of American dynasty. Both men rebelled against their privilege into mediocrity. Both men have shed their skins as Washington elitists, reinventing themselves as Westerners who inhabit ranches and pray to Jesus in their wise evangelical churches. Myth number 4, that John McCain was a Top Gun pilot. John McCain calls himself a Maverick and clearly enjoys the Top Gun nickname, but he was not a Top Gun. John McCain had graduated 5th from the bottom of his class at Annapolis, out of a class of about 900 students. He took that same sort of level of academic discipline into his days as a pilot. And John McCain was known more as a party boy, as a fly boy, than a skilled pilot. He paid very little attention to his flight manuals and instead liked to drink, he liked to play poker, he liked to play craps, he'd hit the dog track. He'd sometimes stay out all night and then show up for flight practice. Perhaps as a result, he had a knack for stalling out the engine of his planes. John McCain crashed 3 planes, and that doesn't count the plane that was shot down or the plane that was involved in the Forrestal fire, the supercarrier that came ablaze when a rocket hit his A-4 Tinker Toy bomber. Under any normal circumstances, John McCain would have had his wings taken away from him. Navy pilots didn't get this many chances, but John McCain wasn't a normal Navy pilot. During his training for Vietnam, he was stationed at McCain Field, which was named for his grandfather. And one time when he was coming in for a landing, they told him to wait and circle around, and he didn't want to do that. And so he said, "You'll let me land now, or I'll take my field and go home." Myth number 3 is that somehow John McCain was the hero of the POW camps. For this piece, I talked to 2 former POWs who served with John McCain, and they described his experience as average. He was tortured into a confession, he gave up some military information, but for the most part was just another one of the POWs. At the Republican National Convention, Fred Thompson said that John McCain had been tortured for 5.5 years. In fact, that's not true. John McCain was tortured over a course of about 1.5 to 2 years from 1967 to late 1969 when Ho Chi Minh died and the treatment of the POWs got much better. In the official John McCain narrative, he was offered a chance to go home, and this was the great test of his mettle. That he was offered a chance to go home, but he decided to stay there in Hanoi with his fellow prisoners. But in talking to the fellow POWs, they also described being offered this early release. And what that meant was making statements disloyal to one's country, talking about how great the Vietnamese were, and in short, doing the kinds of things that could subject a POW to court-martial upon return. And so they described this decision as not hard because the conditions of the release were to be disloyal to one's country, and that was to both of them and to most of the POWs unacceptable. Myth number 2, that John McCain is a straight-talking reformer. John McCain is most famous for campaign finance reform, which was an effort to get large, unregulated sums of soft money out of politics. But the way he chose to pursue this reform was totally hypocritical. He set up something called the Reform Institute, which solicited large, unregulated sums of soft money from corporate interests who had business before John McCain's Senate Commerce Committee. And the final and number one myth about John McCain is that John McCain always puts country first. In fact, John McCain has put himself first. We've watched him run for president twice now, once in 2000 as a principled centrist who asked America to judge him by the way he ran his campaign. And now he's running in 2008 as an unprincipled hawk, someone who's practicing Karl Rove politics and very much the same kind of candidate that he once denounced. For political reasons, he's changed his position on any number of issues, from his own immigration platform and even on his very personal issue of torture. The only constant there is a man who wants to be president, a man who has been overwhelmed by his ambition, a man whose character is his ambition. As his former Republican Senate colleague Lincoln Chafee told me, John McCain puts himself first. He puts himself first in blinking neon lights.